So I sat down and made a list of the things I wanted to write about. And that list, of course, included airships, genetically modified creatures, walking tanks, World War I politics, and girls dressing as boys to do cool shit. And then, like, a funny thing happened as I was first starting to work on Leviathan. I got the Japanese edition of Uglies, which you can see in the middle there. And I was like, this is so cool, this is so great, it's Japanese. And I love looking at foreign editions because you find out how they translate your weird science fiction words into another language. Like Uglies is full of hoverboards. And I was like, oh, what do they call hoverboards in French? And I went to it and it was plunk. I was like, plunk? Oh right, plank, like a board. So they're just calling them boards. But when I got the Japanese version of Uglies, I opened it up and realized that I don't read Japanese. So there was no way for me to decipher what was going on, except that it turned out there were pictures. This is Tally and Shay on their plunks. And it was one of the first with like 15 pictures in the Japanese edition of Uglies. And I was like, I took pictures and put it online. And said, look, the Japanese edition has pictures. And there was outrage on the internet. People were like, we didn't get pictures. Why are there pictures? How come we don't get pictures? And I was like, that's a really interesting question. So I started to do some research. And it was informed by a wise 12-year-old manga fan that all light novels in Japan have illustrations in them. Like when you read a mystery, when you read a romance, when you read a science fiction book, they've all got images, they've all got illustrations. The thing that we don't have anymore in our novels. And I was like, that's weird and strange. And then someone reminded me, a librarian came on saying, we used to have pictures in the old days. When you bought War of the Worlds in the late 1800s or early part of the 20th century, there were illustrations. People liked pictures in their books. And the images that were in books were really powerful and important. This is from an early Sherlock Holmes book. And as you can see the deerstalker cap there. Like that deerstalker cap is the symbol for Sherlock Holmes. In fact, I've been to some library systems where they put a deerstalker cap on the spine of every mystery, like you put a rocket ship on the spine of a science fiction novel. But here's the weird thing. There's no textual evidence for the deerstalker cap. Like, it makes no sense. Actually, Sherlock Holmes canonically hates the country. Like in Hound of the Baskerville, he's sitting there and saying, oh, the country sucks. There's no clues. There's no witnesses. And so why would he wear one? Well, it turned out that the guy who did the illustrations, Sidney Patchett, which is why there's an SP down in the corner, lived in the country and stalked deer. So he just threw that on in this one illustration, and it became the symbol of the character and of the genre. So if illustrations were so powerful, like why did we get rid of them in the West? Why did the English-speaking world decide to get rid of the pictures? And partly it has to do with the fact that back in the early part of the 20th century, there was tons of illustration everywhere. Like when you bought something from the Sears Roebuck catalog, it was illustrated. When you opened up the newspaper to read about last night's baseball game, it was illustrated. So every town had this set of people whose job was called draftsmen, who just did realistic photographic looking, realistic drawings. So there was a big building of them somewhere. So if you were, publishing a book, you could just go to that building and get someone to do some pictures for you. It didn't cost that much. But of course, those people all disappeared due to this horrible device. Catalogs got rid of, this is a very early camera. In fact, it's so early, they didn't have another camera to take a picture of it. So they had to draw it. And so when cameras came out, suddenly all the catalogs, all the newspapers, all the advertisements dropped their illustrators and switched to photography. And as that sort of installed base of expertise and talent disappeared, publishers were like, now it's getting expensive to hire illustrators because they're flying artists. Those are the only ones that are left. So what's wild is that when you were 11 years old, and you went to your school librarian and she handed you some, or he handed you some book without pictures, and you were like, what's with this? Why this sucks? Why are there no pictures? Did they say, oh, it's because the camera was invented? No, they gave you some line of bullshit about your imagination. They said, like, oh, big kids don't want pictures in their books, which is patently not true. So I was thinking about all these thoughts when I was coming up with Leviathan, and I realized it's set in 1914. There would be pictures in this book if it had come out in 1914 or in the 20s, like after the war. So why don't I find somebody who can do cool illustrations and make it look like a book from that era? That would be so much fun. And I found this amazing guy called Keith Thompson. He's Canadian, and one of the first things he said is, we need a map at the beginning of the book. And I'm like, you are my people. And as you can see, this map, I think it's one of the best things about the whole series is it shows like the two different kinds of powers, the clanker powers, where they use machines, Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and the Darwinist powers, which are used, sort of biological creations, what's it called? Bioengineered creatures. And actually, this was a very popular style of map in the old days. Like, they actually drew maps like this, because a lot of people were illiterate. So when you had to teach them, like, which countries were good and which countries were bad, you just drew a map like this and said, hey, these guys are trying to eat us. As you can tell, this is not our world. This is a world divided into two groups. They're called the clankers and the Darwinists. The clankers use machines, much like in our world, and the Darwinists are so-called because in my world, in the 1860s, Charles Darwin discovered DNA. And the Darwinists started creating animals to take the place of what we use machines for. So they have these big, war machines and industrial machines, and they use a lot of muscle power. They send messages with these message lizards, which are sort of like half parrot, half lizard. You say something to them, and then they skittle off and they talk in your voice and tell the person who's supposed to get the message. So it's full of all these weird arcane technologies. Now, interestingly, this had some effect on the clankers, who started designing walking tanks. Because, of course, they were looking at the Darwinists and saying, why don't we have walking tanks? Why don't we have walking war machines? So they did. Also, walking war machines are cool and fun, and were on my list of things that I wrote down that I wanted to put in this book. Now, what's really fun about this is that Keith created a sort of visual language for the two sides of the conflict. The clanker technology is very square. Okay, this is Alec on the back of this stormwalker, and you can see how everything's very square, everything's very rigid, and socially, and in terms of hierarchy, they're very rigid and so it sort of reflects their philosophy as well as their technology. Whereas the Darwinists, because they've been inspired by nature, this is the captain of the Leviathan, the airship, and as you can see, his desk almost looks like a living thing. And there's a Nautilus shell at the top of that mirror. And so there's lots of Nautilus curves and Fibonacci series and sort of natural forms and shapes. Whereas the clanker machines are much more sort of, rigid and straight. Interestingly, this scout craft that features heavily in the first episode of the anime, and a little bit in the book, is designed partly on a real thing that someone tried to build in the 1920s, which was a mechanical horse. That was kind of interesting. The way that Keith and I worked was pretty straightforward. There's 50 illustrations in each book. There's like 60 in the last one. So normally when you do an illustrative book, you write the whole text and you give it to the illustrator, and then they do the drawings. But he had so many drawings to do, and his line work is so specific, and it takes him long enough that Keith had to sort of go along at the same time as me. And what was cool about that is that I would write a few chapters and then send it to him, and he started to do sketches and send it back to me. And sometimes he would draw something so cool, I would be like, oh, that has to stay. So this thing that was going to disappear and just be in one chapter, then wrapped around and came back. And I think that's something that you lose sometimes when, these days when like Netflix makes an entire show and then dumps it all, like you don't find out what the fan favorites are. I was tell the story that Spike was supposed to only be in Buffy for like 3 episodes. And then everyone was like, that guy's cool. So he stuck around and, became one of the iconic characters of the show. And that doesn't happen as much anymore, but it was happening just between me and Keith, because I was like, yeah, that's a great thing, that's a great object, we're gonna keep it. Sometimes we had trouble communicating. I asked, there's a scene where the Stormwalker, which is this, let me tell you a little bit about the characters, because some of you haven't read the books. Prince Alec, this guy is the son of the Archduke Ferdinand. So on page 1, his parents are killed and are assassinated, and World War I starts. And I also thought that was a really interesting situation to be in as a human being, is to have your parents killed and to have your own world shattered, but then the rest of the world falls apart because of it. Because of the Archduke Ferdinand dying, Russia attacked Serbia, and Serbia called on help from, it's more complicated than that, Germany, I can't even remember. The whole European order fell apart. And of course, that's a very depressing character to be Alec. It's not to be an Alec's head for the whole book would have been a little bit sad, because he's recovering from such great loss, and the whole world is a reflection of that loss. So I thought it'd be great to have a character who's having the time of her life, who's Darren Sharp, and her father was an aviator, and she has joined the Royal Air Service by dressing as a boy, and is discovering her own identity as a boy, and is like flying around on a giant whale. So what could be more fun than that? So anyway, there's a scene where the Stormwalker has to drag a big thing across the snow, and Keith just couldn't understand what I wanted him to draw, so I built it. And hilariously, I had a little tiny model of a walker anyway, but this is what he came back with. And I was like, that's a good day on the internet, when you send somebody that, and they send back that. That's not my usual experience with online activities. But let me tell you a little bit more about Darren. She was partly inspired by, I was reading a lot of books from the era. Like, I wanted this to feel and vibe a little bit like a book from 1914. So I read this thing called A Trip to Mars by Fenton Ash, which is just the best name ever. And this is like an absolutely bananas first page, which I'm going to read to you. What a magnificent sight. What a scene, Jack, old man. I think I'll have to go in to supper without me and leave me to myself. It seems a sort of sacrilege to go indoors, to exchange the moon's beautiful light for the miserable glimmer of a little oil lamp, and this invigorating air off the sea for the smell of paraffin oil. You're a queer chap, Gerald. As dreamy at times as any girl, I declare. You amuse me vastly when you take on these sudden sentimental fits. When you're in this mood, no stranger would ever imagine you were the same go-ahead, muscular young Christian you can prove yourself to be at other times. That is the wildest way to introduce a male friendship I have ever seen in my life. And I tell you, I read the rest of A Trip to Mars, despite this opening chapter, and the word girl does not appear on any other page. Because there are no girls in A Trip to Mars. There's a queen of Mars, there's a king of Mars, there's a princess of Mars, and just to prove that Gerald is a muscular young Christian, he punches one of those many princes of Mars. And there's no mention of any queen of Mars, of any princesses of Mars. It's just boys, boys, boys all the way down. And I was like, and it was like, clearly back then when you read a novel for young people, it was either all girls or all boys, and never the twain shall meet. And I was like, that is just whack. And so I wanted to write my 1914 novel in the exact opposite sense and put a really cool female character who's out there doing badass stuff, and also looking at her own identity in various ways, which I was probably less aware of in 2009 when I read this book than I am now, but which the enemy can address. this is cool. The first scene is where she goes off into Huxley. It's sort of a jellyfish that's been designed to carry one scout up into the air to look at enemy formations. It's called a Huxley because Darwin had a stomach condition where if he got nervous or upset, his stomach hurt and he had to lie down for like 4 hours, which is a terrible condition to have, especially if you discover evolution, because it's just people yelling at you for the rest of your life. So he had this friend called Huxley, who was called Darwin's bulldog, because he would go out and argue with people, because Huxley was like a guy designed for the internet. He just loved a good fight. And his day job was studying jellyfishes. So I thought it would be cool to have the first sort of cool, weird creature you have be named after Huxley. There's also this wonderful sort of tiger lion thing that drags around as transport. What I love about Keith's work is how a lot of it looks like Edwardian, illustration, like engraving, very fine line. But then you have Darren over the side who almost looks like a manga character. So it's sort of like this Victorian manga vibe. This is the Leviathan itself, a giant airship that Darren winds up serving on. It's immensely exciting and cool to be on it for her. Then we went through a couple of designs at the beginning. Originally it had these sort of weird sails. But I didn't want a lot of stuff on the top because I had seen some amazing pictures of what it was like to actually serve on Zeppelins at the time. And these people going just like, it's not like a plane. You're not going 400 miles an hour. You're going like at most 80 miles an hour airspeed. So you can actually stand on top. It's the whole Zeppelin is a lifting service, so it's like you're standing on top of a wing, but it's curved and you've got to be on ropes and you can go down the side to repair holes. So there's all this cool stuff that can happen on top of the airship, which is of course part of the book and part of the anime as well. And those of you who have read my other works know that there's a lot of jumping off of things. There's a lot of characters with personal flight devices that you jump off of. The bungee jackets in Uglies, and the bungee jacket scene is in the Uglies movie, I'm very happy to say. I was like, that has to be in there. In Midnighters, there's a character whose whole superpower is jumping off of stuff. And of course, we have Darren classically going to rescue somebody by jumping off. And that also made it into the anime, I'm pleased to see. One of the cool things that we started to do while we were writing the book is we realized it would be nice to really know what we're talking about when we do these illustrations and when I'm writing the book. So at some point, Keith moved from just the sort of outside shots that appeared in the book and started to do deck plans. Now, this is when I really knew that Keith was my people. Because in addition to having a map at the beginning, he wanted deck plans for us to use. And because they weren't going to appear in the book, we could just use them as we could do them in color. We could make them as big as we wanted, we could make them as weird and complicated as we wanted. And it meant that when I wrote the book, I could actually march little standees around on a big printout of this and figure out where everybody is and who could hear them. And suddenly everything became a lot more real. That's another thing that happens in continuous TV is when you make a movie, you build the set, you shoot the movie, and then you tear it down. But in TV, the sets are always up. And so in the middle of the night, if the writers want to, they can go to the set and use that space as a sort of creative space to figure out what they want to happen and how they want it to happen. And I think that's incredibly useful just to have a space that's open and real. And a lot of interesting things happen because of it. There's this, when he did this cutaway on the side, you can see there's a sort of person who looks like they're on a wireless set there. And there's it's on this part of the thing. And I was like, what's that room? And Keith said, well, I just assumed that's the med-surg lizard room, where they all come and they're resting, and that guy takes care of them. And it's full of tubes, and it's full of little lizards. And I was like, wow, I am totally setting a scene in the message lizard room. And so at one point, Darren and Alec have to meet in the middle of the night because they're planning something. And so they're surrounded by the cages of all the message lizards. So if any of them says anything loud, all the message lizards will repeat it, like, you know, I love you, I love you. So they didn't say that in that scene, but that would be cool. That would have been good. So like Keith doing the deck plans opened up dramatic possibilities. And like having a model, having a set, having a stage means that you come up with story ideas that you wouldn't have come up with. So it's like people think of like, of it going one way. Like I write the book and someone draws it, but the drawings bounce back and change the book and make the book different. There was another scene or another thing where he did a sort of cutaway of a ship, and I'm going to run to them. You can see there's like there's like a line right there where there's like a couple of lines connecting the top and the bottom of the, you know what? I think there's a technology for this. Is that working? It does not. Anyway, I said, well, what's that cable that's joining the ship? And he said, it looked a little weak there, so I decided I would just add some structural integrity, because he's kind of an engineer. And I said, well, someone's going to slide out that cable, man. So I had to create an entire enemy and an entire plot point just to get Darren to slide down the cool slide thing, which I think also in the anime. You know it's good when it's in the anime as well. I did a cutaway of the tank, of the Stormwalker, of the walking tank. And I was like, it completely changed my idea of how crowded everything was. And I had lots of people standing up and pacing and talking and waving their arms. I realized, no, it's not. It's not going to be that kind of environment. It's too close. So it's not somebody, standing up and waving their arm at you. It's you feeling them tense up because their shoulder is pressed against yours. So the writing changed and the way I wrote the scenes changed. And in some ways, the intensity of the scenes changed because of what Keith had done. There was another case where I wrote a scene with 5 people in it, and he illustrated it. There was only 3 people in it. And I was like, Keith, what's up? And he was like, it was kind of crowded. It looks bad. And I was like, do you want me to rewrite it? He was like, yeah. So I rewrote it with 3 characters. And the scene was better too. In the book, the text was better. So there's this crazy thing where like drawing things, and I'm sure that writers back in the old days, like Sherlock Holmes and War of the Worlds, knew this and understood this and had these things happen. And I'm sure people who make movies and manga know all about it. But I was just fascinated to be rediscovering all this stuff and realizing that all of my prose writing, non-illustrated novel writing friends had never experienced this set of interactions and bounce back in. So we ultimately wound up creating something called Manual of Aeronautics, which was like the 4th book in the trilogy, everyone's favorite thing, which is just our deck plans basically for everything, and that was really fun. And then of course, so there was that set of illustrations that didn't appear in the books, and then of course, once Leviathan got out of the world, you got another set of illustrations that didn't appear in the books, which is fan art. And of course, fan art expands the universe even more and looks at the creatures and the world and the characters in different ways. You have various kinds of, you've got the classic picture straight from the book, pretty straightforward. This is a scene from the novel. This is the sort of more manga version of the characters, more manga than Keith. So you can tell it's manga because it's windy. You always got to have the hair and the scarves blowing around. We had Full Metal Alchemist Leviathan. I don't think I have it in here, but there's a My Little Pony Leviathan as well. And you also have, one thing I've noticed about fan art, and also fan fiction, and all fan creation, is that quite often it's not about the parts, it's not about the plot. It's about the moments where the characters are just hanging out and having quiet time together. Because we never write that, like it's certainly less so, K-dramas will do a lot of time. They'll give their characters a lot of time to just hang out and eat and be silly and be funny. But one of the great tragedies of Western media is we're like, where's the plot? It's got to happen. We got to get to the next, thing, and everything has to serve this overarching march to the climax. Whereas in fan art, quite often, they just, these are your friends. These characters are people you like, and you just want to hang out with them in soft, quiet moments. You want to see them in their funny stages where things have gone awry, maybe some things that didn't quite happen in the book, and, oh yes, okay, fine. So fan art takes on that set of, takes on that set of para-literature where you get to see another side of things. Obviously, there's also 3D stuff, you can build things out of Lego, there's cosplay where you can embody the characters in various ways. I love this cosplay. Somebody actually built the flying jellyfish, which they didn't fill it with, they filled it with helium and it still didn't fly, which made me sad. So it's hanging from the ceiling, but it's still pretty awesome, as is this walking tank. There's some wonderful crossplay that has happened where, one person playing both Alec and Darren, which I really enjoy. So you have so you have, what happens in the text, you have what happens in the official illustrations, and you have another whole set of investigations of character and interaction and plot that happen in the cosplay and fan creation. And that, of course, brings us to the anime, which becomes another set of things we can explore. Because the anime, it's very much the same story, it's very much the same characters, but it's a different medium, and it has, it's going to look different and feel different, and the way that people express their emotions are different. I mean, if you did a live-action version of this, I'm sure, you have this Austro-Hungarian emperor kid. He's going to be really stiff-lipped and stand very straight, but obviously in the anime, no one's going to do that because they'll just look like you didn't draw them, like you were trying to save money. So everyone's much more expressive and more big-eyed, and there's this wonderful anime-ness about it. It means, of course, that all the characters get to be in color. We get to see their, we get to see the uniforms. There's already been some cosplay based on the anime, which was great. That's me and Tyler, who's the cosplayer, and Christoph, who's the director of the anime. But it's also been really fun to see the, the Manual of Aerodynamics was in color, but it was mostly deck plans. It's really been great to see the Stormwalker as something in the real world, something that reflects light, something that that walks through forests, something that is, even though it's a piece of gray machinery, it still has a lot of color. And of course, one thing that you don't get to see in any of the books or any of the fan art is how things move. And to actually, even one footstep right there is suddenly that's a completely different object, and your awareness and understanding of the way the Stormwalker works is completely different. What's happening here? I don't know. Oh no. Alright, here we go. Just this shot, which is the Stormwalker in the rain with lightning reflecting off it. One of the things about Orange, the studio that's doing the anime, is that it's they're mostly a CG company. They do a mix of painted background paintings and hand-drawn animation and CG animation. So you have this wonderful hand-drawn look, but at the same time, when lightning flashes, when there's light, when there's sun, you get an incredibly beautiful, all the metal glints. I've been able to see this because I've been seeing these, these episodes go through stages, and there's one where it's just wireframes, and there's one where it's drawn in, and there's one where there's no background, and just I thought it was done, and then there's five more versions, and there's one which is just the metal is going to glint now. And so you get these, so everything takes on a very different life. And what I thought of as sort of dead gray metal becomes very glinty. The Clanker stuff is much more lively now because it reflects light in a certain way. I'm gonna walk for me. Yeah. So this is the Stormwalker running, which is just it's really intense and really dramatic and dynamic. And the amazing thing about Keith is that, you know, one of the first things that Justin said, like in our first phone call was, do you still like Keith? Because I was like, because, you know, they wanted to make sure we hadn't fallen out over 3 books, but of course Keith's Canadian, so he's great, he does whatever I want. But he has an engineer's brain, so a lot of this stuff really already worked. And we were able to keep his designs and make them move in a way that made sense. Also, just having the Leviathan, you know, appear in a sky full of light is amazing. It looks completely different. It has a much different vibe than it does in the books, where it's more like, you know, an engraving, more black and white. There's a wonderful image from book 2 of what it looks like on the bridge of the Leviathan, the captain's bridge. For his commanding, you know, has, and obviously the Darwins love their wallpaper and their patterned floors and their carpets. And of course, in the anime, the model is actually super close to what it looks like in the book. But now it's not just one image; it's a model. It's a 3D model, and you can put a camera anywhere in there. You can move your camera around inside that. And it sort of opened up what that space is. And we found all these, you know, like the inside of the Stormwalker is a model. The controls of the Stormwalker, you know, you get to see Alec actually pull the levers and push down the things to make the Stormwalker walk. And so like, again, the way I read my text now and the way I understand my text has completely changed and completely been broadened, like it was by Keith's illustration, like it was by the fan fiction that came out of it over the next 10 years. Like now there's this whole other level of, you know, obviously it's not fan fiction, but it's people building the world. Somewhere there's somebody who just has been sitting around for 3 years modeling the inside of Leviathan and trying to figure out like what was around the corner that we didn't see, what was, you know, what's on the roof, what do the lamps look like, how bright are the lamps. All this stuff that isn't answered in the books, isn't answered in the illustrations, has all come to light and you know, continue to inform the text and to inform the idea of the story and to make the characters bigger and cooler. And which is to say that which was taken away from us by the evil camera has been given back to us by the good and beneficent Netflix. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions for me or Justin, is there like a mic stand you can put this on? Thank you so much. Just, I guess, line up in the middle. You can go first, because you can do your thing first. Your hand.
Is this a question or more of a comment?
We love comments.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
I can talk pretty loud, so I don't know, but I just wanted to say, I've read your books when I was like in middle school, and I am a PhD candidate now. I just defended my proposal, and I'm working on the dissertation. And I study the Great War, and I specifically study illustrations and soldier sketchbooks from the Great War.
Wow.
And it's kind of because of you, and kind of because of Keith. So I just wanted you to know that like, that was the impact that these books had on me when I was reading them. And yeah, I'm going to be a doctor soon. So yeah, thank you.
So wait, have you defended your PhD yet?
I defended my proposal, so I'm working on writing it.
Wow, so you have like 5 years to go. 2 years.
So I have to do it all, yeah.
Fantastic, so congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
really wild. Yeah, I'm very interested in that PhD, actually. Thank you. Hi, yes.
Hi. Also originally read the books in middle school. Loved them. Phenomenal. But my question was, you said earlier that Keith would have come back with some drawings of stuff that you had put in for like a page or two, and you were like, "That's super cool. I need to keep that in." What are some of the stuff that happened with?
Right. The elephant in book 2, so they go to Istanbul in book 2. There's this thing where the Ottoman Empire wasn't sure which side of the war they were going to join, and the Germans sent them like free battleships. There were these 2 German battleships that got stuck in the Mediterranean, and they were like, the British Navy was like, you're not going anywhere. So the Germans just said, okay, we'll just give them to the Turks, and maybe the Turks will join us. And the Turks were like, that's cool, 2 battleships. What do you got, England? And England stole a battleship from the Turks. Said, well, we're not giving it to you in case you join the other side. They'd already paid for it, and the British were building it. So I was like, that was like one of the dumbest things that the Entente powers did during the war. And I thought, what if Dr. Borla, who's one of the other characters in the book, what if she was smarter than that and was on a diplomatic mission to the Ottoman Empire? So when they go there, the symbol of power in the Ottoman Empire was the elephant. It was the imperial animal. So there's this really great walking elephant, which I don't have a picture of, and it was going to just appear in this one image, but it was one of the most amazing things that Keith created. So that stuck around. Some of the stuff in book 3 stuck around longer, like Pancho, when they meet Pancho Villa. They travel around the world, basically. I'll tell you about that in a second. But anyway, thank you. Hi.
Hi. So, going off what the amazing young woman who said about her going for a PhD and stuff like that, it made me realize that I'm kind of on a similar track, insofar that I read book 2 first.
Oh.
And then I went for book 1, and then I got book 3. But
who else here reads trilogies out of order sometimes? Because I do it. Yeah.
I didn't
I
didn't need to. It just kind of happened like that. But because I saw it in the bookstore, and I was like, oh, this is really neat. Oh, cool.
It's like the second one has a better cover. I'm going to read that first.
But I became like super obsessed with the Ottoman Empire for like 6 months after reading that book, and like I completely went down a rabbit hole, the Goben and Breslau, and the whole chase of the Mediterranean and everything. And now I am pursuing a master's for history, and my field of study is Ottoman studies and Middle Eastern politics and stuff like that from the turn of the century. So I want to say thank you for that. It was a major inspiration doing the same thing as she did. That's pretty cool.
Wow, that's great. Something compare notes. That is bananas. Oh no, something else is getting up. A bunch of humanities PhDs. That's wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't have a story about it changing my life, but I did read the book when I was younger and loved it. And I really appreciate and just am amazed that it's getting an anime adaptation. It's something so unexpected. I was wondering if you could talk about how, like you talked a little bit about how getting a chance to bring this into an anime is like giving you new ways to see the world of Leviathan and present it. And you talked about how maybe the anime might explore things slightly differently, like
right.
in positive ways. I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, very much. I mean, it is a very tropey book, and I was sort of throwing together a lot of the tropes I like. Kind of that word. That word isn't used as much as it used to be on the internet. But one of those was like the girl pretending to be a boy so she could do fun stuff. And there was always, and part of that trope was always like that at the end, the girl was supposed to put on a dress, and everyone would be like, oh, no, you're beautiful. And I didn't see it because now you have long hair and you're wearing a dress. And I was like, Darren is never doing that. Never once. So even like, a guy born in Texas in 1963 and wasn't super smart about
gender at that time, I knew that that is not what that character wanted and not who that character was. And I think being true to that character helped bring a lot of fans to the book who were exploring their own gender and were maybe trans in various ways, and who then educated me, and that, again, like fan art does and like the illustration does, have changed my understanding and my view of the text. And Cubic and Orange have been very understanding of that and had me in the writer's room every Wednesday morning at 8:30 in the morning because I'm in Japan, and was and so we never referred to, like, I've been talking about Darren as she, but we always refer to them as Sharp and as they them, and so it's very much just their identity. And when we get into the third book, all three books are in this. We're doing all three books is one season. So in the third book, sort of episodes 9, 10, 11, 12, we really address her as a transgender character.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. Cool. Yes.
Hello, I had a comment and a question. So
Sure.
on the comment, I really do love the physics behind everything. One of my favorite Netflix shows outside of this is actually Arcane, and what I love about it is in fight scenes, there's like weight behind every single punch, every single object, and like that first Walker step really kind of encapsulated that. I really love that. So thank you for bringing that here. I guess on my question, I'm not studying for PhD or anything. I was a business student. And I was wondering, it's been, 8+ years since I read the books, how to go from a book to an anime now in 2025 on Netflix.
Right. So you know this story better than I.
We were approached I was approached by Netflix, and they had acquired the rights to this book, and I think anime has had like such a surge in popularity, and I think for a lot, I think people were posting even online, this would be a great anime. I think this would be a good fit, and I think sometimes you never really know, if how things might turn out, but as we were developing and working together, I felt like it was clear that this was like a really great story that would fit very well within the anime space, and also Orange, and also bring Christophe on board as well, who is like, he's from France, so he has like European perspective. So I think it just like, I think it kind of happened kind of naturally and organically. And as we started, it just became so exciting to see that process. And we just all got like, I don't know, I was like, so happy with how it came out.
I mean, I think, a kid flies around on a whale, around the world on a whale. This kind of Studio Ghibli. Like, I think there's a kind of sense that, of course they do. And so I think the phantasmagoricness of the Darwinist creatures lends itself to anime. I just think there was something. I think it was just the right kind of. It's really great. And it's really great to see something that was very black and white, and sort of like it's the early 20th century. It's World War I. It's all the black and white things. To have it become so colorful and so beautiful is kind of a wonderful transformation. It's like Porco Rosso. Like something. Fascism, but pigs, and they're flying. and it's like that kind of transformation is what I love about anime.
Which that's my favorite Ghibli movie.
Deep cut. Yeah. Thank you.
So, grad school gang unite, rise up, I guess. I'm a librarian, and I did want to just quick comment. I did just send this panel bullying at minimum 7 other librarians into making sure they have this series on their shelves. So you're welcome.
The system works.
The system works. I did actually want to know, because I was a history student before a librarian, you said you read a lot of books from the 19 teens. Was there anything else you thought was really worthwhile studying in preparation for writing?
There's a great book called Europe's Last Summer, which is about the sort of, the summer before. That's not from that era. There's a Maddox Ford book written right after World War I that's amazing. The name escaped me, but that's it.
Grad school gang!
Oh no, there's so many PhDs, I can't say anything wrong now. Wow, crazy rules. What else was good? There's a company called Diary of a Prussian Boy, which is just like what it's like to grow up as a Prussian kid in that era. Spoiler alert, it sucks. But yeah, that's all I can remember right now. I do at some point. I did at some point send them a list of my books that I in case they wanted any. So I have a list somewhere. I can put it online. At some point I'll put it online. Like when the anime comes out, I'll just put out my research thing.
That would be awesome.
On my blog. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a librarian. And we're done. Last question.
Just quick question and comment. Also grad student, also love the work. Only recently discovered it, but already love the historical with the fiction and some of my favorite things. But the question is, when it was being created into an anime, what were some of the surprises you had during the process? Like, did it make you realize something about the characters you didn't realize before, or the things in the process you never thought were part of it?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think.
I think Klopp being
Yeah.
Volger being Volger is very much Alec's replacement dad, but and that's very much the case in the book. But in the anime, Klopp, the character Klopp, who's the master of mechanics, is very much Alec's replacement mom. And that was not something I would have written, but that's very anime. Like you have a big burly guy who's like, the almost a maternal figure, who's very caring and, and such he's good with kids. He's a giant, he's 10 times bigger than anybody else in this, and he's just like the nice mother character. So I think that is very much comes out of the anime as a style and as an aesthetic.
He also loves coffee too.
Oh, he does. I didn't notice that. Yeah, he is also. Yeah.
It's one of the.
Didn't realize that was a character now. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I'll talk to you afterwards.
I'm so sorry. I have a question now, actually. I let it marinate, as all good PhD students do.
Okay.
But I know World War I is such a visual war and it's such a visual conflict with the first films of war really being released around that time. And I was just wondering if that played any role in the way that you imagined the scenery and the settings. I know obviously the Western Front doesn't really feature as much in the Leviathan series, but still those images of the war and the posters for recruitment.
It is it's the first. There's some photographs of the Civil War, etc.
Yeah.
But it's the first war where there's a ton of photographs. So yeah, it is, and it's the first war with movies.
Yeah.
And I do think that sort of the old tanks moving over things is part of what we were going with. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everybody.